Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. And welcome into the post game the day after, 2 days if you're going to watch this on Tuesday. Post game wrap up of Super Bowl 58. The Kansas City Chiefs obviously defeated the San Francisco 49ers 25-22 in a game that I believe took about 4.5 years off my life. Um, I promised myself a long time ago I wouldn't get disinvested in games, and here I am, right back in the middle of being invested in games. Um, but that's what happens when you have a really dynamic um, quarterback like Patrick Mahomes, who is who has to be the most talented quarterback to ever play this game. I'm not going to call him the greatest of all time yet, the GOAT. Um, I don't think he needs to win 7 Super Bowls to surpass Tom Brady. I think you can get past Tom Brady with some other career accomplishments, but I think he's on his way. But they got to keep it moving. Um, I think you can have the discussion at 5. I think if he gets to 5, some will start getting there next year if the Chiefs three-peat and he gets his fourth. Um, but it's going to be interesting to see how the conversation is. I've been listening to. I took the today off work. I was really really tired. I was up till 4 in the morning, 4:30. Just I could not go to sleep. I was so wired. And then I took the day off of work and slept most of the morning. And then in the afternoon I spent a lot of time just listening to different podcasts, different media. I watched the entire First Things First broadcast, which I was actually a little disappointed in First Things First. Their broadcast today was it was more downplayed than last year. So, which I thought was a little surprising. Last year was, I don't know, maybe it was more of a cathartic experience. This year, I thought Nick would really come bring it hard, but we'll see. I was just listening to it. I wasn't technically watching it. I was listening to it while I was doing some other stuff around the house, but maybe I'll go back and watch the clips, and maybe I'll have a different perspective. But I wanted to offer some of my thoughts on the game and talk about some of the narratives that are coming out of it, and then kind of where the Chiefs go from here. When I started doing these videos, I did my first. I did my first video. I believe it was it was after the Kansas City Cleveland game in the 2020 playoffs. I think that was my first. And I didn't do a preview. I did a review of the game, and then I just started making videos, doing more previews and doing reviews of each game. Obviously, the Chiefs lost that Super Bowl, and that Super Bowl video I made went viral. And none of my other videos have been viral. I have had a couple reach the 5,000 view mark, which is not that many views, all things considered. It's a lot for my channel. But that Super Bowl video I think it got over 100,000 views. It's definitely my most watched video. It's got like over 700 comments on it. I don't know what happened. It just hit the YouTube algorithm just right. I had almost as many people making comments on the video about my friend's poster in my basement, versus the comments I made about the game, which was interesting. So I tried to respond to some of them like, so I have a Friends poster in my basement. Who cares? I watched Friends 20 years ago when it was on. 30 years ago, really. It came on 30 years ago. It came on in 1994. It was on from 94 to 2004. It's been off the air for almost 20 years now. Um, so, like, have up in your basement what you want to have up in your basement. Anyway, so this game was. My initial thought was it was one of the best games I've seen. And sometimes maybe recency bias tends to maybe overshadow our logic reasoning in terms of what games are great and what games are maybe merely just have exciting finishes. Um, it Excuse me. I'm still tired. It definitely had one of the most exciting finishes, and anytime you can have a walk-off touchdown in the Super Bowl when the team scoring was losing at the time. You know, they were down, and then the touchdown gives them the wins, not tied. Now, the Chiefs did have the knowledge of knowing that a field goal would tie the game, but a field goal there obviously gives the ball back to the 49ers with a chance to win the game with any score, because then it goes to sudden death. So we're going to talk about a couple of things. So some of the things I want to talk about. Let me switch over here to the. This is the CBS Sports website here. Let me again make this a little bigger. So some of these stories on here on the side, I do want to talk about the 49ers and the overtime rules. That's been getting some kind of a play. Definitely want to talk about the overtime prep in general. Before the playoffs is the first time we've seen this happen since the new rules were instituted after the 2021 season. I want to talk about some of the in a continuation of my Facebook video earlier today when I went live on Facebook for about 10 minutes in the afternoon to talk about some of the reaction to the overtime rules. I'm surprised as many people weren't as many people didn't understand how it worked, which is a little shocking to me. But maybe I paid more attention to the details of the NFL than most people do. I want to hit on the dynasty talk. I should probably write this stuff down as I'm sitting here. I don't even know if I have anything to write on, just to keep myself honest. This is why you guys come to this podcast, right? Okay, so we want to talk about dynasty. We want to talk about overtime. We want to talk about Mahomes. We want to talk about Purdy. What else do we want to talk about? We want to talk about Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce? Yeah, we'll talk about Swifties. Look at this. I am making the list of things to talk about while I'm making this video. Isn't that incredible? That's what you guys get when you come to this. I'm going to switch over here to the box score of the game, so we have something to see here. So this game was really slow to start out. The Chiefs' offense, the first drive, obviously they go 3 and out, which was very similar to the San Francisco game back in 2019 when they went 3 and out, and then they went down 3-0 to the 49ers. But then they came back and had a touchdown drive, and I thought that was going to be kind of the way it was going to go. They did have a long pass down the sideline to Mecole Hardman, who was like a 52-yard pass, and but then the very next play, Pacheco fumbled. And going into this game, I was thinking the Chiefs were going to win by 2 scores at least. So I had them winning by 13 points, but I had them up 3 scores, late, with the 49ers kind of getting some garbage touchdowns. I thought the Chiefs defense, which, don't get me wrong, the Chiefs defense played spectacular, but I thought that they would hold up a little more than they did. What I mean by that is I thought that they would maybe turn the ball over a little more on Brock Purdy. The Chiefs did get some turnovers. There were 2 fumbles that they recovered, one by McCaffrey and one on the punt return that really turned the game around in the third quarter. But Brock Purdy did not turn the ball over, and that was something that I didn't see coming. I thought the Chiefs' defense would really confuse him with the different looks, different pressures from different levels. And ultimately, it did work. It just didn't result in turnovers, but it resulted in plays that greatly impacted the game. Some of those plays we'll talk about. So let's talk about some of those plays at first. Let's click over here on plays. See, I'm not as familiar with the CBS page as I am the Chiefs, or the good grief. What am I talking about? I'm just rambling. I'm not as familiar with this as I am ESPN. This is obviously a much larger font. Okay, so one of the plays I want to talk about. That's the end of the game. So this was the last play that the offense ran for. So there were, let's say 2 plays I want to call it first. Actually, let's go back. Well, we can start here and we'll go to the next one anyway. That was the last play that the offense of San Francisco ran before they kicked their field goal, before the Chiefs got the ball, and then the game was over. It was 3rd and 4 from the 9-yard line. So obviously the game's tied at 19. The 49ers, if they score a touchdown, the Chiefs were going to get the ball regardless. And we'll talk about overtime here in a second, the rules and the strategy and everything. But I was on 3rd and 4, and there was a Brock Purdy faked a pitch to McCaffrey running to his left, and he sprinted to the right. I think the play was to go to Brandon Ayuk, who looked like he did have a step on. I don't know who was covering him, but it looked like he did have a step and did have leverage there, running one of those shallow outs, there at the goal line. And he, like I said, he had leverage, and he definitely could have turned it up and scored on the play. But Chris Jones blew the play up in the backfield. He came untouched, and Brock Purdy was forced to basically make a very, very errant pass. And it was nowhere near Brandon Ayuk. It fell harmlessly incomplete. That play, I think if they had run the ball there and not picked it up, but maybe picked up a yard or two, I think they would have gone for it on 4th down. Because it wasn't goal to go yet. It was 3rd and 4 from the 9. So they could have picked up a first down at the 5-yard line. And I really think that at that point of the game, I think it was obviously in overtime, you're going to give the ball back to Patrick Mahomes regardless of what you do. And you want the most points on the board as possible. So the question is that on 4th and 4, they decided to kick a 27-yard field goal, which was good. I was standing next to the TV trying to blow on the TV to get, so Moody would miss the kick, but it didn't work. The question then is that should they have gone for it on 4th down? Because if you don't make the 4th down, then the Chiefs have the ball inside the 10-yard line, feasibly, unless there's a sack. But still, they're backed up at least 90 yards, or around, give or take a few yards here or there. And without, but then all they have to do is drive down maybe 60 yards, 55, 60 yards, and they're suddenly at the outer edge of Harrison Butker's range for a game-winning field goal. So it would have made the game, I think it would have made the Chiefs their task a lot easier. But again, they have farther to go, backed up that far. If you play field position there, if they don't pick up the first downs, then the Chiefs are definitely going to punt, because now at this point, then any field goal wins the game. So honestly, I think the right decision probably should have been to go for it by the 49ers. I was actually relieved when they went for the field goal, because I'm like, you're going to give Patrick Mahomes a drive, which is basically is untimed. Again, we'll get to the whole details of the clock and overtime in the playoffs. But basically, you're going to give Patrick Mahomes a drive where he knows exactly what he has to do, and he's not bound by what the clock says. And we know that a field goal, at the very least, extends the game, and a touchdown wins it. You know what? I'm putting my money on Mahomes on that every day. And like I said in the last video, I put my money on Mahomes every day and twice on Sunday. I'm not going to not do that ever. And we'll talk about his legacy here in a second. I'm going to write that down. Mahomes' legacy. I already put Mahomes' name down, but I have to put legacy next to it. The next play I want to talk about, before we kind of get into some individual some individual things is some play of like individual players. So again, right before a field goal attempt. Now this was towards the end of the game where the Niners they got the ball back with at the 5:50 mark, essentially 5:49 to go, or 5:46, and they were draining clock. They picked up 23 yards, then 9 yards, 3 yards, 5 yards. Then at this point, I was getting a little nervous because they were doing to us exactly what the Chiefs did to the Eagles last year on that last drive. They were draining clock and moving the ball. So at this point, they were at the 35. So they were already in field goal range. To take a 3-point, to take a 19-16 lead. But this play right here, the second down play, was an incomplete pass to George Kittle, who did absolutely nothing in the game yesterday. But man, I'm sure he was a great run blocker. The third down play, which happened after the 2-minute warning, I was actually wanting the Chiefs to call a timeout there to. But I'm kind of glad they didn't. But I thought maybe they should have called a timeout there. But regardless, they didn't call it. They waited for the clock to get down to 2 minutes, and then there was an incomplete pass to Juwan Jennings to stop the clock and bring up fourth down. Now, in my opinion, they're going to kick a field goal here anyway. They should have run the ball here. It would have, at the very least, it would have drained off another 35, 40 seconds off the clock. And if they pick it up, they could essentially run the clock down to at the very least, the Chiefs would have got the ball back with about 18 seconds to go, down 3. Now, we've seen the Chiefs only need 13 seconds to get in field goal range. But again, I don't want to make that. That only happened one time, and it was a historic thing that happened against Buffalo. I don't want that to be the norm, even though we know Mahomes can do it under optimal conditions. But those conditions would not have been optimal because they would have had no timeouts. At least in the Bills game, they had 2 timeouts to play with. So they could run 2 passes in the middle of the field, call a timeout after each one. The deal here with Brock Purdy throwing the incomplete pass, it wasn't just the fact that it was an incomplete pass. It was Trent McDuffie, who had one of the best games of his young career, who was coming free on a blitz, and I don't know if he knocked the ball down, but he definitely forced Purdy to throw the ball before he wanted to, and it was nowhere close to where it needed to be. I think maybe he did knock it down, but Trent McDuffie made just a tremendous play. One of the guys that was part of the he was the pick that we got in the Tyreek Hill trade, the first round pick. We got a couple picks for Tyreek Hill, and he was the first one. He was our first round selection. And Trent McDuffie was spectacular in this game. There was another play earlier in the game on a really nice pass from Brock Purdy to Brandon Ayuk, or it may have been Deebo Samuel. I can't remember which one it was. It was one of those two guys, and McDuffie was with him stride for stride and jumped up in the end zone, knocked the ball away at the last possible second. It was tremendous coverage. I mean, this guy is an absolute... the fact that even as a first-round pick, what was he, number 22, I think, overall 22, 23. This guy could have been should have gone in the top 5. Considering what he's done in his first 2 seasons with the Chiefs, obviously now a 2-time Super Bowl champion, he's made a huge impact on the Chiefs defense in his first 2 years. One of the best draft picks in Brett Veach's career by far. Those 2 plays stand out to me as the plays on defense, and there's a ton of plays, obviously, that were memorable, but those 2 plays on defense really saved the game. Both of them key third down plays. Now they both led. Then the next play, both of them led to field goals, but at least in the second one by Jones, probably saved a touchdown. Now we saw the Chiefs go down and score a touchdown to on the final drive. The Chiefs would have gone for 2 to try to take the lead or to win the game, and that would have been you want to talk about one play to define a Super Bowl. I would have been. I don't know if I could have watched that. That would have been insane. So it was a back and forth. Final. The final 2 minutes. Actually, the final 5 minutes and all of overtime. So the final 20 minutes of game time was just. It was must see TV, and I'm probably going to go back and rewatch it because I've only watched it the one time. I watched it live. Probably go back and rewatch it tonight after I make this video. Just that final 20 minutes. Obviously I'll be much more calm in that video. So, let's talk about some of the key performers in this game. Let's jump back over here just to the box score here. See, they don't have. I'm going to go back over to ESPN. I'm sorry. The CBS site, I was like trying to give them some credit. There's just so much more here. So it said the Chiefs had 5 fumbles in the game. That's not exactly correct. Pacheco did fumble and he lost the ball. Richie James muffed a punt briefly, obviously. And Rashee Rice fumbled, but it was recovered. That Rashee Rice's didn't even hit the ground. It went straight to Justin Watson. Mahomes' 2 fumbles, which is weird. This says they have 6. Oh, because Jalen Watson recovered one here. Mahomes' 2 fumbles, those were both bad snaps. So if the snap actually hits the ground, that's considered a fumble. So, but the Chiefs they only had 1 loss there, but it was kind of sloppy. It made a lot of us very nervous. I want to look at the defensive stats here. So Nick Bolton with 13 tackles, just an absolute beast. Justin Reed, Mike Edwards. But this guy right here is who I want to highlight. Leo Chenal. Actually, both these 2 guys right here. Leo Chenal and Mike Pennell. Leo Chenal played. If you just look at the stat line here, this is why the stats don't tell the whole story. If you look at the stat line here, like, okay, he had 6 tackles, 3 of them were solo, 1 was tackle for loss, and he hit the quarterback once. I'm like, oh, whoop-de-doo, Matt. Big deal. Well, he had a forced fumble. Him and Karlaftis recovered it. Pennell was also involved in that forced fumble in the first quarter on Brandon McCaffrey. And Chenal was also the guy that blocked the extra point on the touchdown that would have put San Francisco up 17-13, but Chenal blocked the extra point and making it a 3-point game, which enabled the Chiefs to kick a field goal to tie the game to send it to overtime. Well, at least to get on that side of it. It was actually tied at 19 to go to overtime. He played an absolute phenomenal game. He did all the dirty work inside, and I tip my hat, my imaginary hat here to Leo Chenal, who he played a ton. I think he played about 80% of the snaps last night, and the Chiefs are probably going to lose Willie Gay next year, and we'll see if Drew Tranquill comes back or not. Nick Bolton's due for re-upping his contract after next season. I imagine the Chiefs will probably want to try to keep him in there as well. That remains to be seen. We'll see what happens because Nick Bolton, while he's amazing and he's a Mizzou guy, he also is injury prone, and so the Chiefs need to find out, is that the guy that they want, as the Mike, on the defense. So. But yeah, Mike Pennell, this is a guy that was part of the 2019 Super Bowl champion Chiefs. And Pennell is he's just a big dude. He's a big hoss in the middle of the defensive line. He's a defensive tackle. We needed someone to come in and play in that rotation with some injuries that they had. Obviously, Derek Nottie was out, one of the starting nose tackle. Charles Omenihu, one of the defensive ends, obviously wasn't playing either. He was out with an ACL injury or an Achilles injury, one of the two. So they basically promoted Mike Pennell for their practice squad, who he wasn't wanted by anybody else. He's an older guy. He's been around the league for a while. And Mike Pennell absolutely he was an amazing run stuffer in the middle of that line. Christian McCaffrey had 22 carries for 80 yards. So, I mean, he got his yardage, but at 3.5 yards a carry, the Chiefs did a great job of bottling him up. And a lot of that was due to Leo Chenal and Mike Pennell clogging up those lanes, clogging up those run lanes. And, man, I tell you, the Chiefs don't win that game without those two guys doing the unsung work. So it's not getting a lot of credit. There was an article at CBS Sports about the 5 unsung heroes for the Chiefs in this game, and I thought, oh wow, but these two guys will be listed. They were not talked about. They listed Harrison Butker. They listed Justin Reed, and Justin Reed played a phenomenal game too at safety. Don't get me wrong. But they listed Trent McDuffie, George Karlaftis, and Leo Chenal and Mike Pennell. Those two guys, in my opinion, outside of Trent McDuffie, were the 2 best players on defense for the Chiefs last night. Mainly because they did the little things that it took for the Chiefs defense to win key downs and to keep the game close when the Chiefs offense was struggling. So again, massive props to both Leo Chenal and Mike Pennell. Patrick Mahomes, obviously, his numbers look great. He was MVP again. We'll talk about his legacy here in a second. Mahomes is great in the second half. I'm going to say he was bad in the first half. I just think the Chiefs' offense wasn't clicking, but it wasn't because of Mahomes. So the guys the offensive line had a rough game. Creed Humphrey, he was not good on his snaps. Luckily, it didn't come back to bite the Chiefs at all in the game. But Creed was not good at snapping the ball. Nick Bosa, who I said in my preview video, I said he was overrated. Man, I was dead wrong there. Nick Bosa had an amazing game. He had 10 pressures on the game. Led every defensive player on both sides, in that matter, in defensive pressures. I don't believe he got a sack. Let's look. I don't think he did, but no, he didn't. Armstead and Hargrave and Chase Young got the sacks. But Nick Bosa, it doesn't show pressures on here, but he did have 3 quarterback hits. Nick Bosa was really giving Mahomes and that left side of the line a lot of trouble. And again, I wasn't very impressed with the way that our offensive tackles played. I do think part of the reason maybe some of the struggles early on was that Mahomes was bailing out of the pocket sooner. I think he could have stayed in there a little longer, but he was breaking out of the pocket, and a lot of times Bosa would track him down or at least force him to make an incomplete, throw the ball away, or he actually forced him into an intentional grounding at one point, which I don't think shouldn't have been intentional grounding. The ball was thrown almost directly to Noah Gray, but that's a whole nother topic. That's another thing. Well, let's write down officiating. It's not a negative thing, but I do want to talk about it. So, all right. So, you guys have seen all of the breakdowns of the games and all the different things. I want to talk. I want to talk about overtime first. And let me write this. I'm going to number these here. I'm going to talk about overtime first. I'm going to talk about Purdy second, officiating third, and then we'll get to Mahomes' legacy, and then we'll get to the dynasty talk, and then we'll get to Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce to wrap it up. Okay, so the overtime rules. As you all remember, after the Chiefs beat the Bills in what is forever will be known as the 13-second game in the 2021 playoffs, the Bills, Josh Allen, and their front office and their fans went into a complete mental breakdown, whine fest, crybaby act. And I'm kind of overstating this a little bit. But they thought that Josh Allen, and of course the media was complicit in a lot of this, especially Tony Romo on the broadcast. Everyone was just incensed that Josh Allen didn't get a chance to match Patrick Mahomes' touchdown in overtime. Now, I actually do think that overtime being sudden death is, man, it's tough, especially in the playoffs. And I do kind of side with both teams being able to have an opportunity, but that wasn't the rule. That's not the rules that we played under in 2021. But that's where we were, and the outcry was what really irritated me, and the fact that it got the rule changed because of the outcry was even more, because it was the media who came to the defense of the Buffalo Bills. The media didn't come to the defense of the Kansas City Chiefs in the 2018 playoffs when the same thing happened to the Chiefs against the Patriots and Tom Brady. When we drove down to tie the game at the end of regulation on a field goal after we thought we had won the game on an interception 2 drives earlier, or on the go-ahead touchdown drive by Brady with about a minute 50 left if I remember right. But it wasn't the Chiefs fans. We were pissed off at Dee Ford in that game, and we put the blame on Dee Ford and Bob Sutton for his inability to stop the Patriots in overtime. I mean, we could have stopped the Patriots in overtime and got the ball and then scored ourselves and gone to the Super Bowl. Probably would have won the Super Bowl that year. But we didn't. We put the blame where it belonged. In 2021, everyone wanted to put the blame on anybody else other than the Bills coaching staff, the Bills defense, whatever, what have you. But because they were so upset because Josh Allen played a near perfect game and still lost. He was still outplayed by Patrick Mahomes in the game, but he played a near perfect game. It's just that Patrick Mahomes played a perfect game. It was one of the greatest games of all time. So the fallout was that the NFL decided to change the rules. The owners approved a rule change at the owners' meeting in the offseason of the 2020 between 21 and 22, and the rule becomes in the playoffs, not in the regular season, but in the playoffs, both teams will get a chance to possess the ball. So that means that the first team to get the ball in overtime, if they score a touchdown, they still have to kick off to the other team. The other team gets a chance to match. So where this caused some confusion, I guess, with some of the fans, is I guess some people just didn't know that the rule had changed, or they weren't they were either that or they were unaware of the mechanics of how it worked. And I saw that with a lot of examples of different videos, watching the Pat McAfee show and listening to some of the commentary for some of his side characters on the show. Pat obviously knows what the rules are. The Dan Patrick show today, man, Dan, I was almost positive, didn't even understand how the rule was different. And Steve Young was interviewed on his show today, and Steve Young completely didn't know the rules, and Dan didn't even quiz him on it or call it to his attention. So I think both of them were completely ignorant of the rules. But they're not part of the NFL anymore, at least especially Steve Young. I mean, he's a former quarterback. But you know who should have known is the 49ers coaching staff and players. Now, the coaching staff apparently did understand what the new overtime rules were, but most of the players did not. And they were coming out of the woodwork after the game kind of whining about this, saying, well, we didn't know. No one told us about the new overtime rules. We didn't understand that if we'd scored a touchdown that we'd have to give the ball back to Kansas City. Now, they didn't get a touchdown. They got a field goal. And I'm like, how do you guys not know the rules of your own game? And coming out and saying that it's an embarrassing look for your team. It's an embarrassing look for you as a player. And it speaks very ill of the coaching staff that shows that they're just not prepared and they didn't do a good job. I mean, Chris Jones was talking about how the Chiefs were talking about this and planning for this all the way back in preseason. So what happened ultimately? So some of the mechanics surrounding this now, there is a coin toss. Now, if you go back and go back to the play, let me actually see if I'll tell you what. Let's do something on the fly here. Final 20 minutes, Super Bowl 58.
Yard attempt for the lead.
Okay. Sorry about that. I'm going to blow this up. All right. Let's put my face up here. It'll keep everything up. Okay. So, this is the field goal attempt.
Rudy's kick. Oh, it's good.
No,
all the way.
Okay, so this is
Wow.
This is before Mahomes' drive. All right, let's go ahead and skip to. See, that's Butker's field goal. Okay.
The first one.
All right, so
28
this
games,
is what the
and Gene, we
broadcast
might
says.
as well
Let's
have you
listen
walk
to
us through it, babe.
Yeah, we're basically starting a new game now.
Okay, that was important. What Gene Steratore said there was that we were starting a new game, which is true. Is first quarter timing rules.
Team's going to get 3 timeouts.
3 timeouts.
They will also both get an opportunity to possess the football, even if the first possession is a touchdown, right?
Okay, so they put the graphic up here. Both teams will have the opportunity to possess the ball. If the score is tied after each team's first possession, the next score will win the game. 3 timeouts per team for 2 periods. No coach's challenge. All reviews initiated by replay officials. Safety on first possession wins. Also a defensive touchdown. Now, what they didn't put on here is what happens if during that second possession, if the clock gets to 0. I think a lot of fans were really confused about that because the 49ers had the ball. They kicked a field goal, and they went down and scored. Well, they scored a field goal with like 7 minutes and 29 seconds left in overtime. The Chiefs get the ball back, and of course they win the game on a touchdown. The clock is running, actually. They snap the ball with like 4 seconds left. And there were some people like, "Oh, the Chiefs going to get the ball off here? They're about to lose," And that's actually not the case because it's, again, if you noticed, anytime a player ran out of bounds under 5 minutes, the clock didn't stop. Well, it stopped at least until they spotted the ball, and then they wound the clock, and there was no 2-minute warning. That's because the timing rules of the first period of overtime in the playoffs is just like the first quarter, and that's why. So let's keep listening here.
The only difference we really have right now is that fourth quarter timing, and all reviews are going to be initiated from upstairs. So
that's incorrect. That is incorrect. So Gene Steratore was not correct. He said so. So the broadcast confused the audience by saying fourth quarter timing rules apply. That is not true. It's actually first quarter, or you could say third quarter. It doesn't matter. First quarter timing rules were in effect.
No challenges right now, but in essence, a new football game.
Great job, gentlemen. We're going to play overtime. Playoff overtime. We're going to start a new game. All replays are upstairs. Everybody will have 3 timeouts. All right? Both teams will have an opportunity to score or opportunity to possess unless the first team is a defensive score. All right? Any questions? San Francisco, you are still the visitors. What is your...
Okay, so Bill Vinovich explained it pretty well. He's not going to go into scenario planning here and say, well, if the second team gets the ball and time runs out, they keep going on. So what would have happened is if the Chiefs hadn't snapped the ball there at the end of the overtime period, the clock would have hit 0. They would have switched sides of the field, and it would have been second, or it would have been the same down. It still would have been first down, and then the clock would have read 15 minutes, and they would have kept playing. The Chiefs get the opportunity. Whoever is the second team to possess the ball in overtime, they get the chance to finish their possession. Just because the clock hit 0, the clock has no regard. The clock does not end the game in that sense. Okay, the clock can never end the game in overtime in the playoffs. It's just you had the game either ends on a score or a defensive stop. The clock is 100% irrelevant because think about it. Even if the game is tied after 2 possessions, the next scorer wins, and a score will win the game, and you can't have a tie in the playoffs. So the clock is irrelevant completely. The clock cannot end the game in playoff football, and that was true even before these rules. This new rule was put into effect.
Your call. Tails again. He called tails again. It is tails. You want the ball. Which way do you want to kick? San Francisco will receive first in overtime. Good luck, gentlemen.
Okay, so Fred Warner elected to receive the ball for the 49ers, so they possess the ball first. Now, because of the new rule that both teams would possess the ball with the opportunity to score, you have to ask yourself strategically what is better. Now, in college, the college has always had the rule that each team is going to get the chance to have the ball in overtime. Now, it's a little different in college because you get the ball on the opponent's 25-yard line, so you're already in field goal range, and then you go until someone wins. You just keep trading back and forth. I've seen quadruple overtime in college, and then they have a rule that in the third overtime, if you score a touchdown, you're automatically forced to go for 2. So it kind of gets really exciting. There was a game with Mizzou when they played Oklahoma State back when I was in school there that was really, really super exciting in overtime. Anyway, that's not the point of this video. So what ultimately you have to ask yourself here is that what is the strategy for overtime? I personally would defer. I would choose to kick. I would choose to have the ball second. So there's a couple reasons. One, when you have the ball first, you don't know what the other team's going to do. You don't have that foresight of knowing what you have to do as a team to win the game. You know that no matter what you do, the other team is still going to get the ball. So when it's say it gets to 3rd and 7, okay, and you're at you're on your own 37-yard line, and then you throw an incomplete pass, and you're still on your own 37-yard line, so you're in your territory that's now 4th and 7. Well, what do? Well, you're probably going to punt the ball, because you don't want to give the other team a chance to give them the ball on your 37, and then you don't score. Now they get a chance to score, and that would end the game. So you're going to punt the ball away. But what happens if you're the second team and you're down 7 points, or you're down 3 points, and it's 4th and 7 from your own 37? Well, you're obviously not punting. That would end the game. You're going to go for it. You will always have 4 downs because you know that if you don't make a first down, the game is over. So you have 4 downs every single series. And the Chiefs converted 2 4th downs on that drive after the Niners kicked a field goal. So you have the benefit of knowing what to do. You're playing with basically 4 downs instead of 3. Now, the Niners never converted to 4th. They never let it get to 4th down. They converted their 3rd downs on that drive to go down to ultimately, unless they didn't convert the last one, obviously, but they converted all the others. The other reason is that a defensive score ends the game. So if you choose to defer and kick off, you can win the game on a defensive touchdown, and that would, like I said, that would end the game. Let's go ahead and move my camera back down here. I like it back in the corner here. So yeah, there's just now Kyle Shanahan, his rationale for what he chose to do. He said I was looking at it from a 3rd possession standpoint. He said whatever we do, they're going to go down and they have the opportunity to match us, and then we will get the ball back, and then we would have it as sudden death. Well, that's almost like saying, "Hey, I think we should play. I think our organization should go for 3 consecutive Super Bowl titles in a row when you haven't even won your first one yet, or maybe you've won your first one, but you haven't won your second one yet." You can't get to third base in baseball unless you first get to second base. And you can't get to second base unless you first get to first base. So Kyle Shanahan was thinking a couple steps ahead. Dude, you got to get there first. It's like managing a bullpen. It's like, what was it? I think it was A.J. Hinch with the when he was managing the Astros in the 2019 World Series against the Nationals, and he left some of his best pitchers in the bullpen, and almost ultimately didn't bring them out in that Game 7. I'm like, I guess he was saving them for the Game 8, which there is no Game 8 if you know anything about baseball. I'm like, what are you doing, A.J. Hinch? Why didn't you use your best pitchers at the end of the game against, in this? There's no tomorrow. And that's actually probably a bad example. A better example would be not using your best pitchers in Game 6. You have to get to Game 7. If you're down 3-2, you use your best pitchers. You can't worry about, how am I going to manage my bullpen in Game 7? You know what? If you're down 3-2, you got to win Game 6 just to get to Game 7. And so I think that's where Kyle Shanahan failed, was that he was thinking about that third possession. He was thinking about getting the ball back. There's no guarantee you're going to get the ball back. Even if you score a touchdown, let's say you score a touchdown, kick the extra point, you're up 7 points. Chiefs now go down, score a touchdown. They're going to go for 2. They already said they were going to go for 2. Patrick Mahomes said that after the game. They go for 2 and get it, the game's over. You don't get another opportunity. You scored 7, they scored 8. Game's over. You don't get another. You don't get a second opportunity. That second opportunity never came for you in this game anyway. You can't plan on that opportunity being there. So that's why I think he made a tremendous mistake by his rationale. I think was completely wrong. Now, from a game flow standpoint, his defense was gassed. They had just given up a long drive to Patrick Mahomes to tie the game. The Chiefs almost won it at the end of regulation, but they tied it instead. And I think part of it was his defense was just really, really gassed, and they needed a breather. So in that regard, I can maybe understand it a little more. I still think they made a mistake. I still think you go out there, you put Mahomes on the field first, and then you know exactly what you have to do. I don't think the game would have ended any differently because Mahomes was doing tremendous things, and the Chiefs defense was doing enough to stop San Francisco on the other side. I don't think it would have ended any differently. But, we'll never know. So that's my thoughts there on overtime. Like I said, I do like the new overtime rules. I'm a proponent of the change. Contrary to what I don't mind the change, even though my team benefited from the previous rules against the Bills. I still like the change. I think both teams should get the chance to possess the ball in overtime. I actually would like them to change the regular season rules to this as well. That way it's more consistent. I don't like having different rules for regular season and postseason. I just don't like that. So, real quick, because we're already at 50 minutes and I still got 6 topics to hit here, so I want to kind of rapid fire these. Brock Purdy, I thought Brock Purdy played much better than I thought he would. He didn't do anything spectacular in the game, but he played within himself. He was poised. I didn't think the moment was too big for him like I thought it was going to be. Like I said, he wasn't spectacular, but I give him a solid B to B minus. I'll just say 82%. Okay, you get 82% on the test. All right, it's not an A, but you're probably satisfied with that. At least I was satisfied with 82% when I was in school. So that's what. So Brock Purdy, I do think that he proved that he belongs as a starting quarterback in this league. And the talk now about can he do it? He's going to be the starting quarterback next year. So it won't be his third full season, but it's going to be his third season as a starting quarterback. He was, for partial of the season last year and obviously all of this year, and leads his team to the Super Bowl. I think he's proven that he can play in this league and that he's got an opportunity. Can he exist outside of the Kyle Shanahan system? I mean, Jimmy Garoppolo didn't and couldn't get it done. Obviously, he was a disaster in Vegas this year with the Raiders. But that's a question that we don't have to answer right now. And when he's not going to be due a payday for a couple more years. And so when he is, will be interesting to see what the 49ers do. Now I do think that Purdy, he's who he is. He's not a high ceiling guy. And that's what a lot of these 4 year college quarterbacks are. You know what you get in them. They're not going to go out there and light the world on fire. Most of them are going to be products of a system, and that's not a bad thing. As we see, I mean, you put the right pieces around him, and you can be extremely successful. So let's talk about the officiating real quick. The officiating, I think, was with Bill Vinovich mostly is a let them play type of official. I think Bill Vinovich is one of the best officials in the league. I do think that there was a couple things that irked me. There was several key spots I thought that they missed on some critical drives by the Chiefs. Several of them happened in regulation, but two of the spots occurred in overtime, and I didn't understand why they didn't review those. And there was also a pass to Kyle Juszczyk in overtime that was the subject of, did he catch it? Des Bryant actually tweeted out on Twitter, that's not a catch. And I don't know if Bryant firmly had his tongue planted in his cheek when he said that, because obviously he was the subject of maybe one of the most ridiculous overturns, in my opinion, in NFL history, by a catch that he made against the Packers in the playoffs, which ultimately was overturned. They said it wasn't a catch, but it definitely was. But Juszczyk, he caught the ball, had 1 foot down, 2 feet down, but he didn't survive the ground. As soon as he hit the ground, the ball came free. I don't know how. Okay, so you can make the argument. So, the football move was him stretching the ball out to try to get the first down, and we stretched the ball out, the ball hit the ground, the ball popped loose. But stretching the ball out was the football move, and it should count as a catch and a fumble out of bounds. Okay. I don't agree with that, but I could buy that, or at least I can understand the reasoning there. Review it. It's in overtime. Andy Reid can't throw the challenge flag. Review it, officials. And you know what? Maybe they did review it. Maybe they reviewed it quickly upstairs and they buzzed down to Bill Vinovich and said, hey, Bill, we've already reviewed this. We agree that it's a catch. You don't need to stop the game. Great. Then say that. Let the crowd know. Because we, as Chiefs fans, we were all wondering, it's like, why is this play not being reviewed? I mean, because the Chiefs the teams can't actually call for a review in overtime. It's all controlled by the officials. So that was the only thing that I was really concerned about from an officiating standpoint. There were some Chiefs fans that didn't like the holding call on 3rd and 15 in overtime on Trent McDuffie. It was an iffy call. I mean, is it the definition of holding? Does it fit the definition of holding? Yes, it does fit the definition of holding. But it was also the only defensive holding they called. I think there was one other defensive holding they called, but it was declined earlier in the game on the 49ers. It wasn't being officiated that way in the game. And I think that's where people like me, we talk about consistency. And I understand why Eagles fans last year were upset about the Bradbury call. By the letter of the law, that's a penalty against Juju Smith-Schuster in the Super Bowl last year. But I understand why they were upset, because they weren't calling it on Bradbury the entire game, but they called it on him then. That sucks. I understand why they're frustrated. And people always say, well, you can't call it there. Well, you can. I mean, it was a penalty, just like McDuffie's call last night on the 3rd down play there. It was a penalty, but that's all. I think that's all that fans and teams and players and coaches are asking for from the officials is, let's be consistent. If you're going to be a let them play ref, then make sure it's egregious. Make sure it's an egregious penalty before you call it. The only other thing is that it's time for us to use modern technology to spot the ball. Okay. I mean, there were 2 times when the Chiefs had a first down and the ball was spotted a yard. One time was a yard and a half back. And again, when a eligible body part hits, whether it's a knee or an elbow, the thigh, doesn't matter. Whenever you are officially down, the ball is not placed at where your body part is down. The ball is dead at where the ball is. Okay? And several times the Chiefs got a really poor spot. They almost got the spots at where the knee went down as opposed to where the ball was, half a yard or sometimes even a yard in front of where the, Kelsey's knee was or Rice's knee was. I think it was Kelsey twice. So, again, I give the officiating an A- in this game. I think they did a really good job overall and letting the players play. Of course, they called penalties that were obvious. There was lots of false starts on the 49ers. There were the Chiefs got flagged for a couple personal fouls, unsportsmanlike conduct. Snead committed a really stupid penalty. Obviously, the holding call on McDuffie. But overall, I think the refs did a really good job of letting the players play and letting the play on the field dictate how the game came out. Let's talk real quick about, again, maybe I should save this for another video, but Patrick Mahomes and his legacy now. When you think about the Mount Rushmore of quarterbacks, Tom Brady is on there and Joe Montana is on there. Before Mahomes, you have to say Peyton Manning, maybe John Elway, maybe Terry Bradshaw. Some people would make a click case for Troy Aikman. I wouldn't, but some people will say Dan Marino, even though he never won a Super Bowl. I think winning a Super Bowl is absolutely paramount. But I think Mahomes has firmly etched himself at number 3. And you can argue about who's number 4, whether that's Elway or Manning. I personally would give it to Manning. I think Manning was a better quarterback than Elway. Peyton Manning, obviously not Eli Manning. Even though Eli Manning is, going to be a Hall of Fame quarterback as well, he was not as good as his brother. The question is that what does Mahomes need to do to pass Montana? Let's not talk about Brady. He's not close to Brady yet in his accomplishments. What does he need to do to pass Montana? Well, he's one behind Montana in terms of Super Bowl rings, 4-3. And Montana, his 4 rings, he won 3 Super Bowl MVPs. Well, Mahomes is 3 for 3 on Super Bowl MVPs. He's won, every time he's won the Super Bowl, he's been the most valuable player. I actually didn't think he was going to get it last night, and he probably wouldn't have, except for all the yards he put up down in the final 2 drives. The final 2 drives is what got him the MVP. Other than that, it may have gone to Harrison Butker, maybe. I mean, I thought Butker was a serious contender for the MVP until those final 2 drives. I would put Mahomes, though, number 3 on the all-time list right now. I'd put it. I think if he gets one more title, I think he surpasses Montana. Montana was 4 for 4 for going to the Super Bowl. Mahomes has been to 4 Super Bowls, but he's won 3 of them, so he does have a loss. He's 3-1, and now his numbers in the playoffs are all-time great type of things. And I'm going to switch back from here. We're just looking at stats here. His numbers are all-time great numbers. He is the best playoff quarterback in NFL history. You can't just solely at wins. There is just a ridiculous stat that says when trailing by 7 or more points, which has happened 11 times in Mahomes' career in the playoffs, he's 9-2 in those games. The rest of the league is like an 11% winning percentage in those games, and he's at 88%. That's unbelievable. It's almost unfathomable what he is doing and the legacy he is building here in Kansas City. I said in my wrap-up video last year after they beat the Eagles that I don't want to hear any other comparisons with him and between him and Lamar Jackson or Joe Burrow or Josh Allen. And I really mean that now. I mean, if one of those three guys had won the Super Bowl this year, you would definitely have heard some people starting to make the claim that, well, he might actually be better than Patrick Mahomes. Mahomes is in a different universe than those guys. And those guys can just argue with a wall, and their fans can argue with walls. Don't come to me and tell me that Josh Allen's a better quarterback. Because any of those teams, they would trade, if they could, they would trade for Patrick Mahomes in a heartbeat. The Bills would. The Ravens would. And the Bengals would. They all would. The question is that it's a hypothetical thing. It would never happen. Would Patrick Mahomes be the player he is on those teams? Probably not. I mean, Andy Reid is a big component of what he does well. But Mahomes has enough, he's got enough in him now that I think he shows that he definitely can be a difference maker. It's going to be interesting, though, when Andy Reid ultimately decides to retire, what Mahomes looks like. And if he is... The ironic thing is that if he is great and wins Super Bowls without Reid, does that diminish Reid's legacy? I don't think so. But if he can't win without Andy Reid, maybe he's just a good quarterback. Let's say he becomes Phillip Rivers, okay, as a comparison. Let's say Andy does retire after this season. I don't think he will, but let's say he does. And the Chiefs never win, and Chiefs and Mahomes never win another Super Bowl. He's still a Hall of Fame quarterback. He's still one of the greatest of all time. But there will be questions about his stature long term, if that happens. But fortunately, we don't have to worry about that. I don't think Andy's going anywhere anytime soon. I think actually what we'll see is I think Andy's going to be around for... I think he coaches for 4 more seasons. I think he hangs it up by the time he gets to right before he turns 70. I don't see him coaching much beyond that. And in 4 seasons, I'm going to say the Chiefs get 2 more Super Bowl titles. I mean, I'm not going to be a homer here and say, they're going to win 4 more. They're going to have 6 in a row. That would be insane. I mean, someone's going to beat the Chiefs at some point. And someone's going to knock them off. Mahomes is getting older. He's not slowing down, but I say that, but they should have been in 6 consecutive Super Bowls at this point anyway. It's been really, really bizarre circumstances that have prevented them from being in 6 consecutive Super Bowls. And if you get to the game, you have just as good a shot to win as the other guy. So, and that firmly entrenches the Chiefs now in a dynasty. There was some talk last year that the Chiefs were already part of a dynasty because they had been to 3 Super Bowls and won 2. It is without a question that this dynasty is firmly entrenched as to one of the greatest teams in NFL history. And there's no question about that. You can't argue it. You can't say one. You there's no counterpoint to it. The only thing that you can talk about it is in terms of where do they rank in terms of the greatest dynasties of all time. And I think a lot of that has to do with how do you rank the Patriots dynasty. Do you rank the Patriots as one 18-year dynasty, or do you rank them as 2 separate dynasties? I personally would rank them as 2 separate dynasties because there was a 10-year gap in the middle that while they went to 2 Super Bowls during that time, or actually they went to three Super Bowls during that time and lost all of them. Because at one point, Brady was 3 for 6 in Super Bowls, and then he won 3 more, and then he won his final one in Tampa. But they lost 3 in a row in that 10-year stretch. They went to 3 Super Bowls, so I can see why you might say that's an 18-year run. It's just that there's so much the only constant in those 18 years was Belichick and Brady. Everything else changed, obviously. No one was a part of all of them except those 2 guys. Maybe some other coaches were, but no players were other than Tom Brady. A lot of people forget that. They think, oh, well, Gronk was there the whole time. No, he wasn't. He was only there for the second part. Regardless, one of those. I think the Patriots' second dynasty, even though I don't think that those teams were as good as the first ones, and the first ones I think had a little more offensive, especially the third one had more offensive weaponry. The first one obviously was just all defense, and honestly, that first one they probably shouldn't have even got there. It was absolutely ridiculous how they lost to they beat the Raiders. That was the Tuck rule, and that's when that whole thing came into play. So the Patriots did get a little bit of a kiss there, which kind of started their whole run. But let's just go ahead and say that the Patriots are the number one dynasty. We'll just lump them in as one right now. So if you lump them in as one, who's the second best dynasty? Is it the Packers from the 60s? I mean, they won 5 championships in 7 years. Now, three of those were NFL championships, which were pre-merger, and 2 were Super Bowls. One against the Chiefs and one against the Raiders, I believe. I think it was the Raiders. So what does that? So are there some? So you could say that they're up there. Obviously, the Steelers from the 70s. That's actually 4 Super Bowl titles in a 6-year period. I would actually probably rank them ahead of the Packers, just because the Packers back in the 60s, the competition level wasn't the same. There was a lot fewer teams. Again, all of this was before the salary cap, and before players moved around like they do now. But the Steelers, they won 2, and then they did make 2 Super Bowls, and then they won 2 more. So there was 2 back-to-backs bookend in the middle where there was nothing. I'm pretty sure they went to the playoffs those 2 years. They just didn't get to the Super Bowl. The Niners of the 80s. Now, this thing I saw today was that the Niners went from 81 to 94. Okay, I think that's a little bit bigger of a window, but if I'm going to count the Patriots as one large one, I also have to count the Niners as one there. But there was 5 years between number 4 and number 5 with the Niners. That's why I don't count their dynasty going to 94, the 94-95 Super Bowl there with Steve Young against the Chargers. I count the Niners dynasty as the 80s, 81 to 89. The 94 one was different. It was not part of that same team. It was a different team altogether. And it was a different coach. It was a different quarterback. Even though Steve Young was part of the previous team, he wasn't the starting quarterback. Obviously, Joe Montana was. So I don't count the 94 team as part of that dynasty because the Cowboys had already started their dynasty. And I'm not saying that you can't have dynasties overlap, but I don't count the 94 team as part of the San Francisco dynasty. So you have those 4 championships of Montana in the 80s. So I would put that one at 3 or 4, then the Packers. So you could say Pittsburgh, San Francisco, Green Bay, anywhere 2, 3, and 4. I'd put the Chiefs number 5. I'd put them as the 5th greatest dynasty in NFL history. Now, I think there's only 9 considered dynasties that you would actually consider. But I would put the Chiefs right there. You can make an argument that maybe they're better than some of these, than maybe the Packers, because maybe the competition level. But the Packers are such a beloved of a franchise that I don't think you get a lot of support there. So I'm perfectly fine with putting the Chiefs at number 5. I think they get one more, whether it's next year. If they get one next year and get 4 in 6 years, that means 5 Super Bowls in 6 years, 5 appearances in 6 years, with a three-peat, which has never happened. I think that elevates them to number 2. I think that puts them ahead of the Niners. I think it puts them ahead of the Steelers. Definitely puts them ahead of, and then maybe does it put them ahead of the Packers? And then, it all comes down to how do you rank the Patriots dynasty? Is it 2 dynasties? Is it the first 3 and 4, or is it in the second 3 and 5 years, or is it 6 and 18 years? So it's how you choose to rate it. I would actually put the Chiefs' current dynasty. If you break the Patriots up, I would put the Patriots' second dynasty as top. I'd put their first one below the Chiefs, because even though it was in a 4-year time period, it was also in a 5-year time period, because they also won 3 and 5 years. But when people say, "Oh, they won 3 and 4 years," well, that year that they didn't win it, they didn't even make the playoffs that year. They missed the playoffs entirely, and I think that, and so they don't get counted as losing the Super Bowl that year because they didn't make the playoffs. But not making the playoffs, in my opinion, is much, much worse than losing in the Super Bowl. So, anyway, so those are some of my thoughts there. I don't have time to talk about Taylor Swift and the Swifties and Travis Kelce, but it was a really nice post game show to watch, and those two they're definitely in love, and if you don't like it, well, you're not forced to watch it. Okay, this is two people that love each other, who are both very good at what they do, and obviously very popular in the world scene. One in music and one in sports. And if that bothers you, well, then go kick rocks, because I just don't. And if you don't like Taylor, like I admit, I'm a conservative person. I don't really care for super liberal politics myself personally, and I know Taylor Swift supports liberal policies and Democrat presidents and candidates and stuff like that. I typically don't. I typically am more conservative. But those are political things, Those are political discussions and stuff like that. I mean, I can separate, political stuff from religious stuff, from sports stuff, and be just fine, and that's why I stopped following a lot of the conservative channels on YouTube that I used to follow, because they became toxic. And even though I agreed with most of what they were talking about, I'm like, guys, this isn't help. All it was doing was getting me mad. And it doesn't change. It's not like I'm a liberal or anything now. I'm way over the board here, but I was just like, I used to follow like Geeks and Gamers, and I started following Geeks and Gamers because it's like they talked about video games, they talked about movies, and then it just became a platform just to complain about everything political in Star Wars. And I'm like, am I letting my love for Star Wars when I was younger, am I letting it get clouded because these guys and their political views? Maybe I am. And maybe that's a problem that I have. But again, sorry, I really went off the deep end there. I apologize for that. So, anyway, thanks so much for watching this video. If you liked that, even if you like my rambling there at the last minute, nonsense, do consider giving me a thumbs up below. Leave me a comment. Let me know what you think of my thoughts on the Super Bowl. Again, congratulations to the Chiefs and to my fellow Chiefs fans. We're witnessing greatness. Don't ever take this for granted. I've seen a lot of bad football as a Chiefs fan in my life, and there's been a lot of heartbreak. And this is something that I will never take for granted. Greatness is something that is fleeting. It's not always guaranteed, and there will be a quarterback that comes along someday who will unseat Patrick Mahomes, and that will be a hard day. I kind of am starting to understand what the Patriot fans went through when Tom Brady left New England, and when his crown was starting to be challenged. Now, I don't think there was always a discussion of who was the greatest, and honestly, when Peyton Manning retired, you could make the claim that Peyton Manning was the better quarterback than Tom Brady. I mean, it was a discussion. I mean, Brady rocketed past Manning's after Manning retired. He won 4 Super Bowls after Manning retired. And so the numbers were not that far apart, honestly, when Peyton Manning retired after the 2015 season. And Patrick doesn't have that kind of competition. Yeah, I mean, there's Josh Allen and Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, and whatever the flavor of the month is in the NFC. But they're never going to be serious contender with Mahomes unless they win some Super Bowls. You got to win Super Bowl titles. You can't just put up numbers in the regular season and beat the Chiefs, a couple times in the regular season. Like, the Bengals like to talk about how Burrow's 3-1 against the Chiefs. I'm like, well, Mahomes is 3-3 against the Bengals. It's not just Joe Burrow. I mean, he's 3-3 against the Bengals. I mean, who cares if you win in the regular season? I mean, the Bengals beat the Chiefs last year in the regular season, and the Chiefs beat them in the playoffs. The Bills have beaten the Chiefs 3 consecutive times in the regular season, and they still have not yet beaten the Chiefs in the playoffs. So what does that tell you? It tells you that the Chiefs they turn it up a notch in the playoffs, and there is a second level there that Mahomes gets to. So there's a lot of things surrounding the game in terms of that I didn't really get a chance to talk about, but I just want to say this team, they definitely surprised me, especially with the way they played during the kind of the middle stretch of the season where they lost 5 of 8 games. But again, with Patrick Mahomes as the quarterback, Andy Reid's the coach, you can never count them out. And credit to Steve Spagnuolo, the defensive coordinator. What a tremendous job he did this year with this team. Massive kudos to you, Coach Spagnuolo. And we'll see what happens with the Chiefs next year. I don't really have time to get into all of what's going to happen. I'll just get real quick, though. I think the Chiefs, I think they should go out and sign a top-flight wide receiver to come in and take some pressure off some of these guys. Whether that's Mike Evans, who I think they could probably get for pretty cheap. T. Higgins is going to be expensive, but he'd had a down year, so maybe he won't. Maybe he'll come in it won't be as expensive. But I think he's going to get a lot of money on the open market. Tyler Boyd also is an opportunity coming from Cincinnati. He could be on the market as well. I think Boyd is probably going to be more of a candidate to be let go by the Bengals and not re-signed than T. Higgins will be. But I think one of those two guys definitely could be in a Chiefs uniform next year. But I think between those two guys and Evans, I think one of those three should definitely be in the Chiefs uniform next year. And if they are, if one of them is, if two of them are, I mean, this is going to be a tremendous season next year. And we'll break down what the schedule looks like, and everything. But again, you're never going to count out Patrick Mahomes. Not after what you saw the past 2 seasons. So anyway, thanks so much for watching this video, you guys. If you like it, please give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing to my channel for more content. Again, congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs and to all their fans. And I'm signing off here for the 2023/2024 NFL season. I'll see you when it's time to make another video, probably coming up around the draft time. Until then, take care, everybody, and I'll see you.